It happened to me
Inglefield?
recently in the airport. I was in Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
and someone comes over to me. He didn't look Jewish. He didn't look Israeli to me, and he says something in Hebrew. And the first time he said it, I heard it as just sound. And then after I realized that he's speaking Hebrew and he repeated what he said, I heard it clearly and I understood it right away.
Yeah, isn't that cool? That it's really very cool when you see things like that, especially when some of the things that we talk about in class, you'll see and you'll say, "Dang, all the stuff I learned in school is real. This is not just made up." It's very very cool. Um, so right now we've been talking about watching the brain work, and what we're going to talk about in the future is how that connects with the rest of your body. What's the connection, the mind body connection, and how does it work? Um, the uh, we can teach you how to modulate your brain activity. That's what meditation does. And again, when you learn a new skill or when you learn a new language, you form new connections in your brain, which never disappear. And when we do therapy, we actually erase the old connections and cause new connections to form. The more you practice the skill, the more the connections are reinforced, and the harder it is actually to forget that skill. Um, the and often your skills. I'll give you a very interesting example because the skills generalize in your brain, you're not aware of it. So I play a number of musical instruments, and most of them on the brass instruments you play with your right hand. Hold it with your left, play the trumpet keys with your right, except for one. The Wagner or Bayreuth tuba. And so so when I first got it, this beautiful instrument, and it looks like it looks like a Bayreuth tuba. There's actually a picture of me online playing it in Toro. Um, but it's played with the left hand. It's not played with the right. And I said to myself, when I got it, this is going to be a little confusing. I'm going to have to relearn how to play the instrument using this hand, which I have never used to play an instrument, except piano, but I've never used it to play a trumpet or anything like that. How am I going to relearn all the fingerings? Pick it up, put it on my lap, start to play, and it's like, dang, how did that happen? It's working. I can actually play it. I don't have to relearn. Somehow the abilities went from this side, from this hand to this hand, and it's actually quite cool. And I'm
Did it
like,
did it feel
pardon?
awkward playing it at all?
For about 2 seconds, and
Interesting.
then I just stopped thinking about it and started playing.
Because like I'm imagining like a guitar, so I know how to play
Yes.
like a little, playing it like normally. But if I were to switch it to my other hand, it like I would know what to do with my fingers, how to make chords, but it would probably feel very awkward and weird.
I'll try it after class. See how weird it feels. Jimi Hendrix played left hand. If he can do it, you can do it.
He
Anything
was
Hendrix
a
can
lot
do,
better
you
than
can
me.
do better. I would imagine. But it's a very interesting feeling. And actually, if you're going to play left hand, you're going to have to restring it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't play the guitar. I know how to play it, but I don't play it. Um, I know the theory. I don't know the practice. Um, so your brain is very plastic. You can learn new things. Things are never forgotten. You may have trouble accessing them, but they're still in there. Are there any questions? Any thoughts or any question on the materials? Um, let's see. Do any of you have like a skill you haven't used in a long time? Uh, it doesn't matter playing piano, playing punch ball, playing any kind of skill like you had as a kid, playing machinayim or something like that.
Playing guitar and a little bit of piano. I haven't really played in a very long time.
See how long it takes you to relearn. You're going to find that it takes very, very little time.
Yeah,
And that's what Pavlov says when he says nothing is forgotten.
I like still remember how to do everything, so it's just a matter of doing it. I just haven't done it in a very long
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, all the paths are in there. Same with the language. Um, I don't have any more to say on this topic. There's um, the one of the things which is very interesting is that people who have Alzheimer's, the memories are still there. They can't access them. They can't get to them. They're locked behind, walls and such. But they can access them if you play music. Just as in Awakenings, people who could barely walk can dance. They can move to music because one of the first things you experience as a human being is rhythm. Your mother's walking and you're going back and forth. Tall and tan and young and lovely. You're going back and forth with the rhythm of her walking. And that's a 4/4 rhythm. That's a marching rhythm. Over hill, over dale, whatever it may be. Da, 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 da. So the first thing we experience as human being is rhythm. And therefore, the ability to dance and to recognize music is in a different place in your head than speech. And people who are so demented they can't speak can still sing and they can still dance. People with Parkinson's can dance. And one of the things we do with people who have Tourette syndrome is we teach them to sing. People with Tourette syndrome have a neurological condition where they'll like burst out in sounds or curses. And when you first hear, there was a guy in Baltimore, a big tzaddik, big Thomas Chacham, who had Tourette's, and he would bark. He was able not to curse, but he'd be talking to him, but he was the Bal Tefillah for the Amam Narayan. As long as he could sing, he wasn't barking. It has a specific rhythm. And so when you're working with people with Tourette's, you teach them how to sing when they talk. And so their voice is kind of sing-songy, and it's a little weird, but it's a lot better than cursing or barking. And people remember songs. For example, do you remember any of your camp songs from when you were a little boy?
Yes.
When was the last time you sang them or heard them? They're going to be there forever. There's going to be songs in your heads that you hate that are going to be there forever. I was driving back from the country with my granddaughter, who's 2, and she listens to this thing called Mendy music. And she loves it. That's which means that I heard the same songs for 2.5 hours. Everybody walk, walk. That's going to be in my head forever. No matter what I try, it's going to be there. People remember music, and we move to music, and therefore when people have movement disorders, you play music, and they can move.
Is it true in the movie Awakening, that part where the Robert De Niro character, he was kind of reverting, unfortunately, and it was getting pretty bad, but when he was dancing with the woman, he suddenly was able to calm down?
Yeah, that's true.
Wow,
It really works. It's pretty amazing.
that's
And
wild.
so when you have people with movement disorders, you teach them to dance when they walk. Again, they look a little funny, but they can move. There was a guy I worked with who had Tourette's, and when he talked, he would sing. It would go up and down and up and down, but he wasn't barking or cursing. So it's pretty cool.
Does that mean, like, dancers, do they not get movement disorders, or
No, they do.
if they do, is it easier for them to kind of cope?
Yes. In fact, this was very interesting. George Balanchine was the world's greatest ballet choreographer. And he also choreographed West Side Story. He was a great choreographer. But the problem with dance is that there's no notation, like with music you use notes. And they wanted to recreate one of his early ballets. So you got all these ballet dancers who were like in their 80s, 90s, old people. And they said, how did Mr. Balanchine choreograph this? I said, look, it's been like 60 years. I don't remember. I said, well, look, why don't you just stand? We're going to play the music. And they played the music, and all these old people started dancing. They remembered the dance. And even people who had trouble moving were able to move with the dance. So that part of the brain is always going to be there. Okay. Are there any other questions?
I had a quick question about like the reading. So
Yes.
I'm a little confused on what the DTI scans were, where like there was water in your brain, I guess. They like scan the water
Yeah.
in the brain.
Okay. Your brain is not solid. If your brain was solid, it would weigh like 50 pounds. You'd have to have a neck like a football player. inside your brain, and you need to know this as a dentist, they're hollow spaces called ventricles. And they are filled with fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, which functions like a radiator in a car. It cools off your brain. When people have meningitis, the spinal fluid gets infected. So it runs, you have ventricles here, and in the middle of your brain. The fluid runs down your spine. Okay, so we can see how big the ventricles are. We can look at the fluid, and if the ventricles are very large, that's a bad thing. As people get older, parts of the brain begin to disintegrate, and the ventricles get very large. People who have vitamin B12 deficiencies, people who are alcoholics, people who are anorexic, they don't get enough B12, and gradually the ventricles get bigger and bigger. Now, as a dentist, this is important because the upper teeth are right under the sinuses and these ventricles. And for some people, when they lose a tooth, the bone between the sinuses and the ventricles and the tooth is very, very thin. So if you're going to put in an implant, you have to be extremely careful because you don't want to puncture that bone, because then people are going to wind up with an infection in their brain. They're going to die, which is considered to be a very bad outcome. Yes, sir.
No, I'm just listening. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyhow, so we look at the cerebral spinal fluid, usually to determine if there is some kind of infection going on there, or to see how big the ventricles are. Are there any other questions or any thoughts? Boy, it's real busy up there, isn't there? Here you thought you just had a brain and did stuff, and all of a sudden it's like all these little tiny pieces all coordinating. It's and it's so complicated that it's really hard for any human being to actually understand all the details of what's going on there, because it's much more complicated than a computer.
I think it's so cool that like in 30 years where the world is going to be in regards to understanding of the brain and the things that we can do and the medications and the procedures that we're going to be able to do because of our growing knowledge of the area. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's really cool because now they're still working on this, but it's the idea of targeted medicines, that we would develop a medication specifically for you. It may not work on anybody else, but specifically for you. And that work has just begun at Penn, among other places, and Boston, Mass General. But that's where a lot of the future research is going.
It's wild. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. If I were younger, I would definitely go into this. And I like what I do. I've always loved what I do, but this is pretty cool stuff. And as I said, this is what my daughter does. And it's very cool. Okay, I got nothing more to say. You got nothing to say? Okay, how about we say good night and good Shabbos? Good
night and good Shabbos.
Okay, and if you guys are applying for grad school, if I can be of any help, talking about your interviews and so on and so forth, you know where to find me. Third booth from the back, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks for coming. Thank you. Be well.
I'll keep you updated, Professor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good Shabbos. Bye.
You too. Good Shabbos.
Not too long.